Okay, so who painted this? Does anyone have any idea who painted this? So it looks like a Rembrandt, but it was not Rembrandt. So was it painted mechanically? The answer is yes. In last year, they used deep learning algorithms to basically they scanned a bunch of Rembrandts. They took depth maps of the oil paint, and they did some stuff and 3D printed out this, and so it's like a full oil painting using oil with the same kind of like depth as Rembrandt paintings. So this was the result, and so it's unlike any Rembrandt that currently exists. It's effectively a new Rembrandt painting. Or is it? Well, we'll come back to that later. Who thinks this is art? Show of hands. Cool. So we think it, well, so some of us thinks it's art and some not. So this is also rendered in oil. Was it made mechanically? Does anyone think that it was made mechanically? We've got one, great. So it was made mechanically, and now some of you are going to think, oh damn, deep learning got really good. But actually it wasn't made by computers mechanically. It was mechanically made, but by a guy called Tim. And this guy was an engineer, and he had a theory about how Vermeers were painted, and he discovered that if you hold a mirror up to an image and you're looking down, then you can see, this is the device that he used, you can see the image kind of projected, and so this means that you can do a like a direct comparison. Like you do a bit of paint, you move your head around, and then you can see, like I need to make this lighter, or I need to make this darker. And so he painted this entire Vermeer painting using this technique that, again, it's entirely mechanical. It's just using your eyes, and like it's a human machine kind of copying it out effectively pixel by pixel. When Tim made this, so this is the original Vermeer, and this is Tim's copy. What Tim did was he got a this warehouse, and he made all of those like the musical thing, the windows, and he just kind of constructed this entire scene in real life, set up the mirror to make it, or the mirror to make it exactly like the original Vermeer, and then he did this kind of hand copying thing. And Tim was not an artist. He had no artistic training. He didn't know what he was doing, except that he's this like gadgety engineer guy. And so he managed to recreate the Vermeer, like, and looking very Vermeer-like as well. So, is Tim's Vermeer art? So it's interesting, like, do we consider Tim's Vermeer to be different from the Rembrandt that we just saw? Like, so some of us might say, well, it isn't art because no artistic choices went into making it. Like, he mechanically, like, recreated the scene that already exists. The Vermeer had already, like, you know, decided the composition and arranged things like that. And Tim was just like, you know, oh, I'm just going to make this look as much like that as possible. It wasn't like an artistic thing. It was a mechanical copying.
When an artist looks outside and make a art painting, it's also looking at some setting set by nature, but still it's...
Well, I mean, so I'd say usually artists make some kind of artistic choice. So they will choose, like, if they're a photographer, they'll choose like exactly how to position the camera, like what to point it out, that kind of thing. And so, but here, Tim didn't make any of those choices because he was just copying the Vermeer. All he did was like just set it up. So we could say that Vermeer made some artistic choices because he did kind of set it up and he decided what to paint and so on. But Tim is just copying.
He chose which one to copy then.
Yeah. He chose to use this technique.
Right. So yeah. So there is some debate, but it's still we can at least say it has like fewer artistic choices gone into making it. There were some artists who got kind of butthurt over these, and they were worried that things like this would devalue art, because like, okay, if we can have these, then people are going to want to buy those instead of like this thing that I spent like, you know, lots of months making, and you know, oh, why don't I just like print out a new Rembrandt by pressing a button. Now, my question is, should they be worried? So this reminds me of this phenomenon of Walmart oil paintings. Poor people want genuine oil paintings to hang on their house and their walls, but this is expensive and it requires a lot of skill to make an oil painting, and it takes time to paint. So there's this village in China that is this whole, because China's like this, there's this whole village where you can get these assembly lines of oil painting. So each person will do the same mark and then move on to the next one and do the same mark and so on. So that they have genuine oil paintings that they can buy at Walmart and produce these in bulk. And again, artists were kind of uncomfortable about this because, hey, doesn't this kind of devalue our art? I think this is awesome. I think it's super cool that we found more efficient ways to make these paintings, even though they're proper oil paintings and they're actually painted by hand. And the economies of scale can bring more people what they want, and the things that people previously thought were impossible to produce in this mass way are possible to produce. So I think that's great. I think that it doesn't devalue this art. It makes actual art, unique art, creative art, more the difference between that and something mechanical like this clearer. Art that's mass-produced always was less valuable than art that is this kind of unique, one-of-a-kind sort of thing.
Can I just suggest something? Is that
Sure.
actually in this case the more interesting thing it's not the painting, it's the person that can do that. And I think it's the same with the neural networks. The actual output of it isn't really art in my expectation, but the neural network it is, and this remarkable individual that can paint the same thing 100 times.
Well, it's not one. They have scores of artists who all kind of said, okay, yeah, you do this mark, and then they kind of go through.
Well, that's art to me.
I mean, I would say that the artistic, the creativity that went into this was in the original composition, and then everything else was just well, let's just hammer it. It's like a printer. These are human printers. So instead of asking, is it art, I want to ask, is it creative? Are artistic choices being made in either of these? So Tim's Vermeer is just a copy. There's an artist, a living artist, who's in my opinion, one of the best living artists, called Graydon Parish, and he had this to say about this painting. He said, even if everyone in 17th century Holland used the camera obscura, some artists would still make better art than others. There's lots of tools that people use to make paintings, like grids, you see these people kind of gridding out and then they're kind of copying that way. There's also a technique called sight size, which again is trying to make a direct comparison. And so Parish was saying that we can see artists using these tools making better and worse art. He said, quote, "Some people have a sensitivity that others don't. Some people are better at composition, fabric, and anatomy, all to various degrees. We worry about Vermeer because he is so good, not because he is average. If he were the latter, then we wouldn't care." End quote. So let's look at some attempts by deep learning to be creative. These were made by, basically, they fed it various different paintings, and it told it about various different styles, and it said, try and make something that doesn't fit into any of these styles, but is still classified as art. That's what they made. This is this is the creative AI that is making things that don't fit into any other kind of art form that we know of. Here's the styles that they fed it. So, Baroque, Cubism, Realism, and so on. Now, does anyone see anything funny about this? When I was looking at these, I thought, well, those are all abstract. There's no different styles here. They're like none of these are actually kind of really representational. Well, maybe that one. Then I thought, okay, well maybe that one's representational. Maybe that's a seaside or something. And then I thought, well, okay, but then so that's you know, you could call that like realism or like whatever. And then, you know, that could be like minimalism. So actually it is, these are styles that are in this list. It's just that the computer was, it had been fooled by the computer. This is like, by the way, this is the top ranked by humans artworks that this AI produced. So people liked these better. But all of these, I think, that could be said as one of these styles that was mentioned earlier. So we've got like Fauvism, and like, you know, there's a landscape, and there's some stuff that looks a bit like Cubism and so on. So I don't think that this is like, oh, they are new styles. I think it's, oh, they have fooled the computer into thinking that it doesn't count as one of the styles that is already there, and with error kind of introduced. So the reason they aren't new styles is that they're not trying to achieve anything. I hate modern art, but even Picasso did more than this. His Cubism was playing with ideas of looking at things in multiple perspectives. Minimalism was playing with abstract shapes. Fauvism was playing with going wild with color, and so on. None of these are trying to do something new kind of conceptually. They're all just they're all basically something that we know before, but that can fool computers into thinking that it's this new thing. And also, none of these pictures have figures, even though the majority of the history of art has had figures kind of featuring prominently. And I suspect that this is because once you introduce figures, meaning becomes very obvious and important, because humans are very complex. So once you introduce a human into an image, then you've got extremely high demands. You need to take into account not just the superficial characteristics of the figure and the body and the realism, but also like, what is that person thinking? Like, what are they feeling? How are they interacting with the rest of the scene? It has to make sense in order to be good. The machine learning would have to understand the scene, which it can't do because it's not, I mean, yeah. We could create like a deep learning thing that reads the scene for very specific things. So I can imagine that we would be able to make something like a deep learning thing that produces like Valentine's cards with like love expressions and stuff, because it's all basically kind of the same thing. So because it's all kind of using a trope. But in that case, it would be the programmer that says, okay, here are the things that I want, and here's all of the kind of relation that I want in the scene, and then that would be kind of like variants of that would be spat out. But anyway, the point is that it's not the machine being creative. It is, it can only spit out what we tell it to. It can't encode more information than what we give it. It's not the program that's being creative, it's the programmer. But there's still something that might seem disturbing about these copies. Like, they look creative, they look quite good, but they're not. So let's change the question again to something better. Is it good? Is it good art? So yeah, when it comes to Tim's Vermeer, we could say that the creativity was all in the setup of the scene, so in Vermeer's original composition. But let's look at the Rembrandt again. Oops. So come on, how can something so awesome looking be made by a computer? Well, the first thing to notice is that it's kind of bland. I mean, okay, big deal. Rembrandt had a lot of bland paintings. But let's look at this closely. So here we've got these two eyes, and they're actually being rendered in different ways. This one has a bunch of texture, and that one's kind of more smooth. And this is the kind of mistake that a human wouldn't make, because a human kind of understands, oh, those are eyes, and I'm going to make them kind of compatible with each other. But the AI didn't do that. That's because the machine learning doesn't actually know what it's doing. It's just kind of combining stuff.
But it might be the person had eyes that are different.
Sorry?
But the person might have eyes a little bit different from each other.
Yeah, that's possible, but this is more in the way that it's rendered. So it's more like this one has more texture and detail, whereas that one is kind of more smooth. And I don't know, you could argue, oh, it's in the shadow, so that was intentional somehow.
It could be an artistic choice.
Yeah.
the other issue is that that image is most likely, I assume they use the GAN-based architecture, which means the image is sampled from a random space. So there is a certain probability of creating an image which the eyes don't match.
Which is not something that Rembrandt would have done, presumably. Like, he would have thought, oh, no, that looks off, I'll fix that mistake, I'll put more texture in, or I'll smooth that one out.
I mean, I think you're right. It's sort of the mistake that's been made is very unhuman in a way. Like, they might get the eye a bit wrong, but the texture will be the same, right?
The eye thing is just one of many examples that machine learning doesn't know how to make an integrated whole. And what I mean by that is that it can't spot a discrepancy unless it's been told about how to spot discrepancies and like what kind of discrepancies to spot. A lot of art is about making different elements in a painting fit together, make sense to each other, echo each other. A philosopher of aesthetics, Dorian Bandy, called this relational richness. So it's like, you know, a similar idea here would be kind of echoed here, and it's not just echoed in just pure visual appearance, but also in meaning and that sort of thing. But if machine learning doesn't understand what it's doing, it can't make this relational richness. And also, yeah, how is it that this faux Rembrandt looks so good? And it does look kind of relationally rich in a way. Like it's broadly, I mean, yeah, okay, it had a bit of a problem with the eye, but it's broadly kind of looks consistent and so on. It turns out that it's not as new or as creative as it seems.
Can I ask, is it possible to teach the machine relational richness?
I don't think that it's possible to, well, you can teach it any given relation, but to teach it kind of general relational richness would require AGI, like it would require actual human level intelligence, because you have to understand what counts as relationally rich, and if there's something that is a new way of being relationally rich, then it's not going to be able to see that because it can only do what the programmer tells it to do.
Can I just ask, what exactly is relational richness?
It's about...
This is where human intelligence also starts to fail.
Right, so what I mean is something like this kind of this integrated whole with like stuff that's echoed in different, like all of it makes sense together, it's kind of...
Yep.
Yeah.
Sort of like synergy.
Yeah, that sort of thing. I mean, like, so that maybe relational richness is another talk, but like if we can go with like roughly like integration of all the elements.
I just wanted to say, does it not feel that the shoulder is jutting out much more than a human shoulder could come out? It's too big for a shoulder.
It depends what
for a human being's shoulder. No?
I mean, artists also made an anatomy mistake. So.
Everything looks weird when you stare at it for too long.
Yeah, I think
It's too much. I mean, as if someone is can't be that
but,
much.
I mean, like, but I mean, artists make that kind of error as well. So I like. I thought that, I mean, that's a good point, but I think that the eye thing is more of the type of mistake that a machine would make that a human wouldn't make.
Before we get on to relational richness, I mean, the eye thing is just weakness in implementation. That's the sort of thing you can fix.
Yeah.
This is a first go. You could improve that sort of thing.
You can.
I take your point that maybe relational richness you might be insurmountable.
Yeah.
But
well,
it's very subtle.
Yeah. So yeah, good point. I would say that you'll never be able to make machine learning that can spot all mistakes, because some mistakes might be new mistakes that haven't been made before, and so it wouldn't be able to catch those. I mean, a human wouldn't necessarily be able to catch those either, but it has like that's an area for improving art.
Also, one other question on that.
Yeah.
Is that so? They fed in lots and lots of stuff, and measured depths and all that sort of stuff. Is this the one image it then produced, or did it produce a whole bunch and this was the one they chose?
It was not clear to me when I looked into it. Like
Because
I didn't look into it. So
that's
I
a very
think
old technique for
right.
computer generated art. Is to produce all sorts of crap and let you humans
right.
do.
Well, I'm about to
to
explain. I was saying that it does look relationally rich and everything, or at least consistent. We can say like it looks like an integrated kind of thing. So how did it do that, and how did it make a new looking Rembrandt? So it turns out that it's not as new or as creative as it seems. So it wasn't that they looked at all Rembrandts and then clicked the Make a Rembrandt button. they told it, okay, I want a portrait that's Caucasian of a male with facial hair, this age, dark colored clothing, wearing a hat, facing to the right. So they basically already put all of the details into this, and then they made an average, sort of like, here's a typical Rembrandt-y thing. Again, like, all of the artistic choices were made by the programmers at the beginning. What all of this does, I think, is help us figure out what good art is. We can compare what like a dumb program can do, or a dumb kind of copying, to like the kind of the unique thing that the great artists do. And I think that deep learning can be great for like mass-produced products, and like I want to see like these deep learning that can make customized Valentine's cards. I think that'd be cool. Like that'd be the sort of thing I can imagine deep learning do, or greeting cards or whatever. But in terms of great art, computers are very limited at what they can do. Computers can only be average or only as good as their programmer. A computer can't spot mistakes that it hasn't been programmed to spot. A computer can't invent new ideas for what looks good, or what might be an interesting avenue to explore or a theme to explore. Computers can't notice patterns that might be interesting to exaggerate. Again, unless a programmer has already told it to do so, the creativity came from the programmer. It can't create things with new meaning. It can only implement what we've already figured out. So where does this leave all of this stuff? Is it art? I think that deep learning is just another gadget. It's just another tool. It's like a paintbrush. It's like a camera. Like it's very useful. It's like a grid or whatever. Buying an expensive camera won't make you a great photographer, and so using deep learning to make art is not going to make you a great artist. It might save time in rendering and painting stuff out. Like that sounds great. I like saving time, but that's all it can do. It can never do the creative parts. Yeah, so that's basically it. You asked about relational richness. Hang on, I've got it. Hold on. This is like good art, so. Like comparison, like a deep learning can't do this. Like there's lots of stuff going on here. Like there's a story going on. There's like the theories about art and color and composition and stuff going on. There's like repeating themes of those things.
I think to be fair though, I couldn't do that either.
Sorry?
I couldn't do that either.
Right.
but I would sort of be slightly offended if someone said I had no artistic ability whatsoever.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, about relational richness. So this is in the London National Gallery, I think. This is really cool in person. So it has this relational richness of like these three things there, and that's kind of like replicated there. And there's, I personally like this. You don't have to like it, but anyway. So there you go. That's my presentation.
So I'd like to expand actually on that, and that is that if someone looked at the kind of art I could do, they would also say that perhaps humans are incapable of making pictures that have got any sense of realism or relational richness or whatever. So given that the machine-generated art, whatever you want to call it, has only been around at anywhere near this level for about a handful of years, it seems like it's very early on in the process. And so it's perhaps very difficult to make sort of definitive statements about what will be possible in 10 years, 100 years.
Well, so either it will have something that has been programmed into it that it can kind of match for, or it will be able to match for things that, I guess I'm asking, how would you make it match for things that it hasn't been already programmed for? I think that you would need like a general intelligence in order to do that.
But the paradigm, the thing here is that the way these are generated is not by programming as such. You program the technique, but you program them with experiences, and that's essentially how humans are sort of programmed with experiences. And I guess that's in a way what's quite exciting about this stuff is that you're generating actually really good stuff by giving a machine experiences, sort of other images and so on. And that's the way that humans work. And maybe in the future, then machines will be able to generate stuff which is on a human level.
So I guess my opinion on this is that humans have some kind of creativity software that is different from this kind of like algorithm matching sort of thing. It's different from the way that it's machine learning is done, but we don't know how to, like, one day we will know what that software is that makes creativity, but I don't think that it's from kind of doing these methods.
But you're just stating that, you're not really proving.
Yeah. Well, so that I would have to do another talk for that. So I was kind of focusing.
I mean, if we look at another example of art which is not as obvious as the typical art, like visual or music or something, which, like for instance, Go, people make considered art, and like AlphaGo and all these amazing programs, people that are experts at Go think that it's actually being creative, as in they see it making moves and creating strategies that like no one in recorded history of Go will have thought of, and people are thinking like some of them are quite amazing, and like, you know, they're learning from it and stuff like that.
But they're still trying to optimize for something that has already been programmed into it.
It could be producing something as sort of seemingly original. What is original? Like, how do we make that? How do we say that the human is more creative or original in what they've done than this machine, just because it's been fed this information rather than discovering it?
So if I had to bet, I would guess that there is a limit to how well we can do that. But again, like to answer this kind of more fully would require like a talk on like epistemology and the theory of mind. So it might be a bit kind of outside.
The goal of it is to not be classified as any existing art. If you put a face in there, it becomes trivial to go portrait. You don't want it to be classified as portrait. So therefore, it's a very simple solution to don't make it classified as anything existing, rather than to do with actually understanding places. Because we have to think. I think we have to think on a very low level rather than a high level.
Right, but even if you like, if you said, okay, human, like characterize this as existing stuff, it'd be like landscape, minimalist, like phobic, like it's sort of I think that it's just fooling the machine.
Also, when you talked about the sort of choosing, I think what current models do is you take a random vector and you try and map it to a high dimensional vector, low dimensional random vector, map it to a high dimensional random vector like an image, and you could think of that as creativity, because the random vector is pure randomness, and what you're essentially saying is you're trying to map from pure random to a given distribution. Then the problem again is how you define things, really.
Yeah. I mean, like what I kind of want to say here is that randomness is not creativity. Like meaning and like new ideas and new solutions to problems. That's kind of what I want to be creative.
I guess maybe one interesting test will be that if you exposed a number of people, for example, people here, to the images in the data set, and then you ask them. Then you ask them to come up with, and basically human implement this adversarial network where, for example, I try to paint a picture which you then are going to like decide whether or not this was human generated or computer generated. You know, if you did that, I mean, would I be able to come up with anything that was as creative as judged by a human at this point as what the network is able to do? And I think that would be quite interesting. I'm not convinced that humans would win that test. In fact,
non-artist humans.
This is the next thing. I think what he's trying to get at is moving art on and trying to come up with the next evolution of the art and state of the art or whatever. And I can imagine coming up with a fitness function where that might fit, where you say did a website where you're selling up works of art, and it's got to generate ones which are actually going to sell. And that'll work for a while, and then it's got to come up with something new to actually keep people interested.
I'd like to know what kind of fitness function would actually work, because so this theory was the fitness function counts as art, but then isn't one of these existing styles. And like, okay, so we can say, well, it's not that good yet in that these do kind of count as existing styles. They're just for the machine, but maybe something that does that. But like, I'm not sure if that fitness function actually makes sense as like that is what kind of art is, but I guess like that gets kind of like ontological.
What I'm suggesting is a real world one where it's actually humans buying stuff.
Right.
The fitness function is the income
Oh,
generated.
but then it's the creativity is coming from the humans selecting for the art that they like. Like that's kind of like getting a camera, taking lots of pictures, and then choosing out the one that is the best one of those. But then it's that choice that is the kind of creating yeah.
I think we're missing something even bigger than this, which is that history does a good job of choosing things that are great.
Oh,
I mean, you remember Picasso, you don't remember like the millions of other crappy artists who history has forgotten. I mean, for this, we're trying to create a generic method for which you can always produce art. That would be like creating an entire generation of humans, of which every single one of us is capable of producing great art.
Yeah.
And that is just not something that's going to happen. So
That's a really
you
good
could
point.
also view from that perspective that history has removed all the shitty artists.
Yeah, that's nice.
And-
I have it. Yeah.
You know, are influenced by what people like a lot, right? And so they try to come up with, I mean, this is maybe not the artistic pureness, but usually they try to come up with ideas that people will like, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the progressing art is doing problem solving, and problem solving is something that requires some intelligence to do, because you are creating a new idea that did not exist before and that cannot just be kind of generated from sort of stuff. But I mean, again, we don't know what human creativity is. Like, we don't know how to program that. One day we will, and then we'll be able to look back and, you know, maybe I'm completely wrong, but I think they would be done by a different method from this.
So if you applied a sort of artistic equivalent of a Turing test, maybe that's a better test of his art. The people who see it, who don't know how it's created, think it's art. Maybe you get a completely different answer. And, you know, so it comes down to what you, basically the definition of the word art leads to the conclusion straight away.
I would say that part of the problem here is that there's like a lot of disagreement about like what is art, and a lot of bad ideas, I think, about it. So I'm trying to paint a picture about what about the issues here that are kind of like interesting to poke at and so on. So if anyone wants to debate me more on this, then you can find me on Facebook and
It'll be a
stuff.
while till it produces great art, but it probably won't be long till it wins the Turner Prize.
I'm sorry.
So if it was a
Oh, Turner Prize. Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call what wins the Turner Prize art, but
There's, I guess a lot of the issue is that who wants to pay money for this kind of research? I mean, like, you get money from making adverts, you get money from making products. You don't get money for making good art until you're dead, which is kind of defeats the point.
this is done by an advertising company. By the way, I'm just like.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
to
But that's
answer the
like,
question.
it's more publicity rather than for like I doubt there's like a massive research interest into directly creating good art, as opposed to a research interest into creating things that will make people want to buy them.
procedurally generated assets in games.
Yeah.
I mean, there's
Concept art
already
in games and movies and that sort of thing. I would say that's like quite a healthy art field. All right. Well, thank you all for being here.